One author believes that the eviction moratorium will increase homelessness. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over why this author believes that the eviction moratorium will increase homelessness. Now, obviously, I haven't covered many articles like this. This is more about theory, but I believe it's a sound theory, and I believe that he brings up a lot of really good points. But before I get into that article, go ahead, hit that like and subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you want to see on this channel. I'm going to work to keep bringing you articles about the eviction moratorium and other news that's of interest to landlords. So, this article, it comes from fee.org, and it says, here's why the eviction moratorium is likely to create more homelessness. Hint, it's about incentives. In September of 2020, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention announced that they would implement an eviction moratorium that would last through the end of the year. It is now almost a full year since the start of this temporary program and has recently been renewed, scheduled to expire at the start of October. After making the decision, the CDC wrote, "The eviction moratorium allows additional time for rent relief to reach renters and to further increase vaccination rates. In the context of a pandemic, eviction moratoria, like quarantine, isolation, and social distancing, can be an effective public health measure utilized to prevent the spread of communicable disease." Aside from the shaky and possibly non-existent legal basis for the eviction moratorium, it may also have the opposite of its intended effects in the long run. In fact, it could easily lead to more homelessness than there was before it was put in place due to the incentives it creates in the housing market. Yeah, so obviously there are a lot of issues that take place during these sort of eviction moratorium, okay? And I think that what this author is really hinting at is the fact that it discourages small landlords, such as myself and such as many of the other landlords out there, from actually wanting to even be landlords, okay? So if you knew that you were unable to get paid rent, or that your tenant could just stop paying rent at any point in time and that you would have to cover all of their expenses, would you want to put a property up for rent? No, of course not. I mean, if there's no money to be made in it, if there's no benefit to the person doing it, why would they do it? So landlords, a lot of them in these cases, they're stepping back. Okay, they're saying, no, I'm not going to be a landlord. I'm going to sell my property to a owner occupant. I'm going to just completely get out of the rental property business. And that results in there being less rental properties available, okay? And when there's less rental properties available, that means it's going to be harder, especially for low-income tenants, to find somewhere to live. According to Pew Research, more U.S. households are headed by renters than at any point since at least 1965. Young people and low-income families are the most likely to rent. For these groups to be housed, there must be adequate supply. To keep up with demand, new housing must continually be put on the market, either through new units being built or existing units being transitioned into rental properties. But goods generally, and specifically housing in this case, do not simply appear on the market out of nowhere. Individuals or businesses must conclude that it is in their financial self-interest prior to adding units to the market. That's right. So housing will not appear from anywhere, okay? In order for there to be enough housing for people, that means that it has to be profitable to actually rent properties out. That's what a lot of these socialists don't realize. They just assume that people would want to rent controls in place and all these rules in place. Well, they're actually discouraging people from wanting to rent properties out, and that's actually creating a shortage of rental properties. Okay, they create the shortage with the rules they're using to try to keep prices low. Isn't that ridiculous? But I mean, it's just one of those things where if you understand economics and you understand supply and demand, you would understand this stuff. But a lot of the people who are socialists, they don't understand basic supply and demand. In an unhampered market, a landlord and a tenant would make an agreement as to the rent the tenant would pay in exchange for the landlord allowing them to use their private property. If the tenant does not live up to his end of the bargain by, for example, not paying the agreed upon rent, then the landlord can evict him. If the landlord does not live up to his end of the bargain by, for example, failing to failing to perform agreed upon maintenance, then the tenant can end the lease without an obligation to pay for its remaining duration. But the eviction moratorium is a sharp move away from this market characterized by a mutually agreed upon contract that both sides have an obligation to uphold. Under this policy, the tenant has no obligation to live up to his end of the bargain. He can fail to pay rent, meaning he is using and occupying someone else's private property without paying for that right, and the landlord cannot do anything about it. Yeah, talk about an insane system, okay? Imagine getting a good or a service and having no obligation to pay for it. I mean, it completely destroys a capitalist system, okay? It completely destroys everything we know about the economy. And we start off with something like an eviction moratorium on, rents, but then where does this go? Where do we push it from here, okay? Do we suddenly go down to the grocery store and say, well, people shouldn't have to pay for food because everyone needs food? Or go down to the water company, no, you shouldn't have to pay for water. I mean, we can push this any way we want, and the only result is that we get rid of capitalism completely and go into this socialist system. And the biggest problem with that is socialism doesn't work. Okay, it has never worked anywhere in the world ever throughout history. It's been an abject failure. Okay, and that's why I have no interest in it. Anything that doesn't reward hard work and discipline and self-motivation, that's not a system I want to be a part of. Okay. As a result, the eviction moratorium sets a dangerous precedent. The policy requires that landlords pay for other people to occupy and use their privately owned land, thus precluding them from earning any money. Even though this is a supposedly temporary measure, the incentive to build new housing is diminished when the prospect of the government voiding a voluntary agreement between two people with no real warning becomes a reality. One of the determinants of supply is producer expectations. If there is complete uncertainty and producers know that government can simply take away their ability to earn money one day, that will clearly inhibit supply growth. People may opt to sell their unit rather than putting it on the rental market, for example. Yeah, and that's exactly what, I've covered several articles where people have decided to just sell, just get out of the business completely. They've suffered enough losses. They can't do anything to get these tenants out of their properties. They just want to get out and then go live their lives. So let's see here if I can find, I'm going to skip around a little bit in this article, see if I can find a little bit more about this homelessness issue, because it's a pretty long article. So, for some of these people, the eviction moratorium has put them in financial ruins. As a result, the future incentive for individuals to put housing units on the market has shrunk dramatically, and that in the end will cause one of two things to happen. One, it may result in a housing shortage, in which case there are more people who want housing than there are units on the market. This results in homelessness. Or two, there is no shortage because prices rise to a level that precludes a sizable number of people from renting. This too results in homelessness. So yeah, the prices go up so high that people can't afford to rent. That causes homelessness. Or there is a huge shortage in housing, and that causes homelessness. So this whole thing, the eviction moratorium, it will impact homelessness, and not because landlords are evicting tenants from homes, but because the eviction moratorium actually caused a supply shortage or prices to rise. Okay, so the result is the same, and it's all bad. They should have never put this thing in effect in the first place. And the thing that they thought was going to be protecting the tenants is actually going to be the thing that hurts them. Okay, the people living on the streets in big cities that have implemented bold rent control policies, such as New York, are often seen as the victims of capitalism. But in truth, they are actually the victims of government intervention into the housing market. In Ludwig von Mises' book, Middle of the Road Policy Leads to Socialism, he points out that this cycle is endemic to interventionism. And if pursued to the bitter end, the cycle culminates in outright nationalization of the regulated industries and ultimately in a total command economy. As he wrote, The policy produces effects from which the point of view of the government are even worse than the previous state of affairs, which the government wanted to alter. If the government, in order to eliminate these inevitable but unwelcome consequences, pursues its course further and further, it finally transforms the system of capitalism and free enterprise into socialism. Yep, and that's what I've been saying over and over again in these videos. This is what the ultimate consequence of all of these pushes and these eviction moratoriums and, all this freewheeling government money and, it all is just leading straight to socialism, okay? And once you get people addicted to not having to work and getting everything paid for by the system, it's going to be hard to take that away from people. So if we end it now, we still might be able to save things and get things back to the way they used to be.